Hello and welcome to another Kings at Home Daily. My name's Goff, one of the leaders here at Kings, and it's my privilege today to bring the next few verses in our journey through the book of Acts, the actions of the apostles, telling the story of the spread of the good news about Jesus beyond Jerusalem, across the nations, beginning in Jerusalem when Jesus rose from the dead, and he commissioned those first disciples, apostles, go into all the world and preach the gospel, and lo, I am with you. So we're here now in chapter 14, and I'm going to be reading from verse 8. In Lystra there sat a man who was lame. He had been that way from birth and had never walked. He listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked directly at him and saw that he had faith to be healed, and called out, "Stand up on your feet." At that the man jumped up and began to walk. And when the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in the Lycaonian language, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. And the priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, brought bulls and wreaths to the city gates, because he and the crowds wanted to offer sacrifices to them. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard this, they tore their clothes, rushed out in the crowds, shouting, "Friends, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? We too are only human like you. We're bringing you good news, telling you to turn from these worthless things to the living God, who made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and everything in them. In the past, he let nations go their own way, yet he's not left himself without testimony. He has shown kindness by giving you rain from heaven and crops in their seasons. He provides you with plenty of food and fills your hearts with joy." Even with these words, they had difficulty keeping the crowds from sacrificing to them. Now, a bit of a difference here from previous towns that the apostles have entered. Usually they go to the synagogue first, start with God-fearing people, people who know perhaps the Old Testament and hopefully would have an expectation of concerning the Messiah. And so they'd go to the synagogue first, but here there is no synagogue. It would seem that we've now gone beyond the Jewish world. We're now into the Gentile world, and encountering places where there aren't Jews, where there isn't a synagogue, where there's a pagan culture. Might be comparable to our culture nowadays. There was a time when we could assume that those around us had some idea of Christianity, they knew a little bit of Bible maybe, but that's not true anymore. Many people around us now have no background in Christianity and have all kinds of ideas about the meaning of life and so on and so forth. So there's some interesting things for us to learn here as we seek to share our faith and make Jesus known in our culture with those around us. The first thing we see here is that there's a beautiful healing. Verse 8 and verse 9, a lame man is miraculously healed. Now you may remember back in chapter 3, the book of Acts, the same thing happened. Peter and John going up to the temple, and there's a lame man, and he's miraculously healed, and it led to a wonderful response to the gospel, the preaching of the gospel. And so here we have it here. Maybe Luke is helping us understand that those things didn't just happen in the Jewish world, but in the Gentile world as well. The signs and wonders are part of the gospel message, as it were. John Wimber, in his book, I think it's Power Evangelism, makes the point. This is the way the gospel broke out into the world. Signs and wonders accompanying the preaching of the word. And let that provoke us today. Lord, we want to see more healings accompanying the preaching of the word, not just in our church meetings, if there were any at the moment, but in the presentation of the gospel, wherever it's taking place. And of course, for you and I, we can begin by, when speaking to people who are unwell, or when you hear of sickness or challenges, difficulties that people have, offer to pray for them. Can I pray for you? It might not be appropriate there and then. When you go home, faithfully pray. God, would you break in? Would you do something beautiful? Offering to pray for people is not a difficult thing. And I think most often people will say, well, thank you. It may just be politeness, being polite, of course, but it's a good starting point. So be looking for those opportunities when you encounter people unwell or challenged in some way physically. Offer to pray for them, believing that God can break in, and God give us more healings, more signs and wonders accompanying the sharing of our faith. So let's be looking for opportunities to pray for people in need. The second thing I see here is that Paul doesn't start preaching about speaking about the Old Testament or Abraham or anything like that. He starts speaking about the world around them, creation around them. In verse 16, he says, we're bringing you good news to turn from worthless things to serve the living God who made the heavens and the earth and the sea and everything in them. In the past, he let nations go their own way, yet he has not left himself without a testimony. He has shown kindness by giving rain and crops. We call this natural theology, and I think it's a great way to begin as it were the sharing of our faith, to begin to help to get people to start to think about God. Of course, we want to come on beyond that to tell them about Jesus, but we need to give them a context. And so I think it can be a really useful way to start sharing our faith by trying to help people to stop and think. Don't you ever stop and think about this amazing world that we live in? I'm sure you've heard things like statistics like, if the orbit of the Earth were just less than a fraction of a degree out, the Earth wouldn't sustain human life. It's finely tuned. It's amazing. It's creation by design. And so it's a good place to start. And the beauty of the earth, the diversity of species, the colours, the awesome scenes that we can see around us. These point to God. They're God's signpost. I remember years ago, Angie and I we were on holiday. I don't know if it was France or I don't know where it was. Anyway, we were staying in a little hotel. And at the end of the last night, the owner came over and was talking, and he said to me, "I've been working you out all week. I've got you down as a teacher. Are you a teacher?" So I said, "Well, close. I'm a pastor. I'm a Christian pastor." And he then said, "Wow, that takes a lot of faith." And I just replied, really on impulse. I just said, "Well, no. Do you know what? I think it takes more faith to believe that this amazing world around us is just a freak of chance." And that started a little conversation. And I believe that's true, that the natural world, the world around us, is God's signpost. Yes, it is a broken world because of the fall and so on, but it's still beautiful. It's God's world. It's beautiful. And it's a signpost. And of course, we want to go beyond that to talk about who God is, and the fact that He sent His Son, God, Emmanuel, God with us. But it can be a useful way of beginning to share our faith, to get people thinking about life, the meaning of life, and so on. So I hope this morning I want to be provoking you in terms of sharing your faith, looking for opportunities to pray for people, believing that God can and wants to break into their lives, and being faithful to make sure you do pray when you've said you will, and also looking for those opportunities to just awaken people, the amazing world we live in, and the fact that there is a God. I think people have got a lot of questions in these days. What is the meaning of life? There's lots of fears around, and I think there's an opportunity for us to begin to share our faith. Now, in case you think it might be a bit challenging for you, just look at the last verse that I read. After all that had happened, Paul troublemakers come to town, the Jewish troublemakers, and they would stir up the crowd, and Paul ends up getting stoned and left for dead. I mean, the amazing thing is, there's just one verse here. They dragged him out of the city thinking he was dead, but after the disciples gathered around him, he got up and went back in the city. It's astonishing. Whether he'd been knocked out, whatever had happened, it cost him. And it cost him a lot. He was left for dead. He'd been through that horrible stoning. It might cost you to share your faith. You might feel foolish. You might be dismissed as being naive. It won't cost you. It's very unlikely to cost you what it cost Paul. Please, let's not be backing off, but let's be praying for courage, godly courage. Let's be praying for courage to look for those opportunities, to pray for people, and to begin to prod them towards the gospel. So there we are. I hope that's helpful. Hope that's provoked you. God bless you. Have a great day, and look out for those opportunities to share your faith to those you come in contact with. God bless you.